Alright fellas, so tomorrow we're going to be in the re-release of Lear and Hoopa, I think alongside Lear's story event. Right after this one, whatever. Anyway, whatever. We're going to be getting in the rerun of Lear and Hoopa. So, Lear and Hoopa, sync pair that released back during the second anniversary pretty much. So, Lear pretty much tends to be the anniversary character every other year, I guess. No, not every other year, every 3 years. Oh, okay, 8th anniversary Lear coming up in 3 years. Anyway, whatever. Lear and Hoopa, not really a sync pair that people talk too much more about. I mean, they're still good, like they are, legitimately, but obviously better options now. But this guy's gained some buffs, notably Fertiles and an EX roll. And they are all really, really solid. So let's just take a look here at Lear. So level 146 star AX, if you don't know what he looks like, 663 health, 264 attack, which doesn't matter, 170 defense, 227 special defense, 513 special attack, really good, and 324 speed. Very similar stats, honestly, to Golden Go. I mean, kind of. Like, if we look at the stats without the EX roll investment, level 140, defenses are higher, special attacks slightly lower, speed is, I mean, like 70 lower. I mean, I don't know, stats like are somewhat similar, honestly, and then of course they have the same EX roll now, so Lear gains Strike, which is good. He's a tech character. It makes his tech nuke an AoE nuke now, which is good. Makes him very good psychic striker, so that is honestly awesome. Can't really complain too much there about that, because that is really, really good. 553 special attack. Sorry, level 150. 577 special attack. That's one of the highest special attack stats in the game. Only beaten out by, like, a few mega sync pairs and, like, Champion Marnie, right? Like, Signature Wally. I think Giovanni also beats out that offensive stat. I might be wrong, though. And then again, Champion Marnie, I believe, with her passive activated, also, beats out that offensive stat. There are a few other characters, too, I'm sure, but just for like a raw offensive stat, that is very high for a character that, again, does not need to mega or anything like that. And again, that EX roll and EX combination, sorry, the base roll and the EX roll combination, those are very good. Tech Strike, for sure. Anyway, looking at his moves, he's got Snatch, which steals enemy stats, of course, 2 gauge 2 uses, X special attack for buffing his special attack stat, Hyperspace Hole, which is a 4 gauge 172 maximum base power move that targets one enemy. Not bad, honestly, not a bad single target damaging move. It never misses as well. And then follow my lead. His trainer move applies stat reduction defense to the allied field of play, reduces sync countdown by 1, and raises user's crit by 3, and applies gradual healing to all allies. Very solid abilities. The sync countdown, Lear's kind of a sprint character. If we look at his passives, we just peep his passives real quick. He's got Head Start 2, Adrenaline 2, and Propulsion 1. All of these are sync countdown related passives. This is prior to the sprint EX roll, of course, around 2 years before its introduction, pretty much. And, well, obviously he's ahead of his time in terms of that. So he's got a lot of sync countdown. Combine that with, the -1 on the trainer move, then he's got -3 from that, plus Head Start 1. So you've got yourself a whole sync cycle. Not sync cycle, but a whole turn worth of sync countdown taken off just by Lear, which is obviously good. It makes him good at his role, at a role of dealing with sync countdown, especially when combined with other characters like Champion Rosa, who can also do it relatively well, with Rosa specifically having the sprint EX roll. And then again, he's good with self-sufficiency because of the crit buffs and special attack buffs. He's got a little bit of healing with gradual healing applied to the team as well. Team healing is pretty nice, even if it is gradual. And of course, gradual healing is a good thing for pretty much any stage, but also nice in the gauntlet. Gives you some self-sufficient healing. Not too bad. And then he's got his Sync Nuke effect, Singularity's Hyperspace Hole, which has the multiplier with attack power increase when none of the target stats are raised, which is why he's got Snatch, right? You want to steal the enemy stats, make sure they're not raised, and then attack them, and you're going to be doing good damage. There is, of course, some caveats to that, like if the enemy buffs their stats before you nuke and, in between your use of Snatch, then things might not work out too well, but that really just kind of depends on some enemy gimmicks and whatnot. It's really dependent, frankly. But for the most part, just steal the enemy stats right before you nuke, and you'll tend to be fine. Tend to be. Especially if you pick up a certain tile that he gets with investment. Speaking of, 1 out of 5, he doesn't really get too much. I mean, special attack all NPR is nice, maxing special attack. Otherwise, it's just some gauge stuff, which can be helpful, but for the most part, nothing too crazy. 2 out of 5, he gets more gauge stuff with Snatch, Gauge Refresh here, and Hyperspace Hole, Gauge Refresh. He gets Dauntless, Antitoxin, Fast Track 2, Soften Up 1, Train Move NPR, Snatch NPR, and Snatch Catalytic Cure 4. And I guess like Speed plus 20, sure. Either way, whatever. The Train Move NPR is nice, mostly just for the gradual healing and the sync countdown. And I guess the stat reduction defense is, effect as well. That's pretty nice too. You know, you prevent those stat drops. That's pretty solid. But yeah, mostly like the gradual healing and the sync countdown. Fast Track 2 for some speed buffs, so you don't have to run as lucky skill if you're trying to have like a cheap duo or a solo in like the legendary arena or something like that. If you're trying to run Lear for that, then having Fast Track as a lucky skill, or as a passive skill, frees up the lucky skill slot for like, you know, maybe Stoic or Mind Games or Vigilance, whatever else, right? Soften Up 1 for easier crits. I mean, that just removes the RNG element from having to Sync Nuke and, you know, miss a crit, right? That does help. Snatch Catalytic Cure 4 for a 50% chance to restore 20% health. Again, this does help out with his healing a little bit. Combine that with the gradual healing on top of having Train with NPR. His healing's not too bad, again, in a more cheap budget scenario, like the Legendary Gauntlet specifically. But again, outside of that, not too crazy. Most of these nodes are not that crazy outside of the Legendary Gauntlet. I want that to be known. Soften Up's fine, but tends to be just mostly a decent node anyway, nothing super absurd. And then Snatch NPR, more instances of being able to steal enemy stat buffs if they happen to raise them. Pretty self-sufficient, or self-explanatory. And then Dauntless Antitoxin, just preventing poison and special attack reduction. That's fine. Nothing crazy, but it's fine. And then, of course, again, 3 out of 5 gets most of the things he wants for the most part, as is usual. Snatch NPR 2, another node of it, right? 4 sync nodes. Hyperspace Hole, Furious Brain, Hyperspace Hole, Super Duper Effective 1, X Special Attack Ramp Up, and Rising Tide, and also Rejuvenate 6, I guess. Yeah. So 4 sync nodes, of course. Combine that with the, obviously, Tech roll, or Tech EX function of the 1.5 times extra sync power, and then combine that, of course, with 100 here. The plus 100 from the sync nodes, and you've got yourself a 430 base power sync nuke. That's pretty good. Again, on top of having the innate multiplier, and then also having Rising Tide, the more your stats are raised, which again, because you're snatching stats anyway, you're going to be getting up to probably 18 stats, which is the maximum for Rising Tide. That gives him another 120% multiplier. Combine that with the innate, that's 220% in multipliers, on top of having the 4 sync nodes. That's a good sync nuke. And now it's multi-target because of the Striker EX roll, which is where Soften Up becomes a little bit more helpful, but frankly, you're probably not going to be able to pick it up. I mean, you can probably sacrifice something to be able to pick it up and just be more consistent if you want to. Honestly, like, jeez, that is expensive. I have no idea how to really pick it up, honestly, because you kind of do want Furious Brain and Hyperspace Hole as well, but you really don't care that much for Hyperspace Hole Super Duper Effective 1, but it's pretty much your cheapest ride to get that, on top of also trying to get the sync node. So you may just have to end up sacrificing that. I don't know. Anyway. Maybe something like that. I guess that'd be fine. Yeah, it's relatively cheap, I suppose. Okay, but yeah, so just if you want to pick up Soften Up 1, maybe something like that. Snatch NPR, frankly, wouldn't even worry about Snatch NPR. Okay, sure, maybe something like that. There's your sync nodes, I guess. You know, only being able to pick up 2 is not that great, but still. And again, if you do want to, you know, sacrifice Soften Up 1 for one of the sync nodes, you definitely can. It's not that hard. And it's Furious Brain, so you can maybe pick up the other one. You could definitely do similar to that. I mean, you can pick up something like this, and it works out, I guess, relatively well. But just consider, you know, if you do end up wanting Hyperspace Hole, Furious Brain, you're going to have to probably run something like this, where you're going to invest like plus 6 energy, which is fine, not that big of a deal. But again, if you want Soften Up 1, you're going to have to make some adjustments. However big, I'm not sure. So, yeah. Anyway. Other than that, he's got Rejuvenate 6 for gauge efficiency. This just mostly helps out in the gauntlet. Other than that, not really that crazy. I mean, the gauge is nice there, but again, elsewhere, not that crazy. Snatch NPR, combine that. You got 2 of these uses. Combine that with Catalytic Cure on Snatch, and you got yourself some pretty decent healing. Not, like, great, but it's kind of like having double nodes of, I guess, mini potion NPR. Something akin to that. I mean, it's something. The healing's not like that absurd, but if you can get lucky with your NPRs, then it can be good for some somewhat reliable healing. So it's better than what he had prior, which was pretty much nothing. Just gradual healing, right? Anyway, At 4 to 5 now, with the extra fairy tiles that he just gained, Lear gains Snatch, no stat up on the field 9, and Unfortuitous 9. So Snatch applies the no stat increase effect to the opponent's field of play when the move is successful. This happens every time Snatch is successful, so this will prevent the enemies from raising their stats for a while, as long as the field is in effect, which will in turn make it so you don't have to use Snatch as often in order to make sure enemy stats are debuffed, and again will make sure that enemies can't raise their stats. So they'll be wasting their trainer moves or their big attacks and whatever else that's a great thing, right? Like I think Giovanni, the ultimate battle, is blocked by that, right? Like he's got a ton of OP trainer moves, but if you apply the no stat increase effect on the enemy field of play, well, effectively shuts down a lot of his gimmick. And that's very, very helpful for sure. And then Unfortuitous 9, random debuffs. Good for any fluid fortification stage. Could be good for some clutch legendary arena wins with like accuracy debuffs and whatnot, offensive debuffs. All of that can be helpful. It smells like popcorn. Why is it okay, whatever. Special defense debuffs as well for damage. All of that. Very, very nice. Random debuffs can be helpful in a lot of different regards. Mostly in legendary gauntlet scenarios, but again can be useful elsewhere, like any stage with fluid fortification like Annabelle. Are you really going to run Lear versus Annabelle? Probably not, but also the new Evelyn stage as well. So there are a few different instances of that where Lear's random debuffs could legitimately be helpful. And so Unfortuitous 9 is good. 5 out of 5, Unbuffed Foe, Freebie 9, and Sync Move 7, stats up 1. Raising stats, all stats other than crit by 1 after using the Sync Move. This is infinitely repeatable, so if you do need I guess a better way to max Rising Tide, but also this could be good for buffing the stats he cannot raise by himself, of course, which is everything besides special attack pretty much. Of course, you can snatch stats as well, but having a more consistent, I say more consistent, but honestly, it'll take a literal decade to be able to get these stats to even like +4, +5, or 6. Obviously, he'll be able to buff his defenses. That's nice, right? The defenses, the speed buffs for gauge, evasion for dodging, all of that is helpful. It could be clutch as well, right? Like even if even if you're going to be running Lear and you're going to be only getting to +2 or +3 evasion or something like that in the whole battle, maybe more or less, right, depending on how much damage you can do, you're still getting good evasion buffs, right? Those evasion buffs can be crucial for some dodges. Combine that with Unfortuitous for accuracy debuffs, and he's really becoming a big character that can start taking hits better with offensive debuffs and into defensive buffs, and then accuracy debuffs and evasion buffs and stuff like that. Combined with the healing from Catalytic Cure, the gradual healing, and whatever else, you got all of that to work with too. So he's got the ability to buff his stats and debuff enemy stats, and then heal himself, and that's really, really good gimmick to have. And on top of all of that, he effectively becomes gauge efficient. Unless the enemy is able to buff their stats or like cancel out the stat raised nullification effect on their field of play, you're able to effectively get just free gauge the entire battle, which is amazing because of Hyperspace Hold being a 4-gauge move, right? You would generally believe that, okay, this move, we're going to need a gauge support, or we're going to have issues with gauge or something like that because it's a 4-gauge move. Well, if you picked up Unbuffed Foe Freebie 9, you don't have to worry about that. Obviously, you do have to sacrifice some stuff to pick that up, but most of these are big utility things that are going to be good in the gauntlet anyway, which is a game mode more so where you're able to sacrifice like full optimization and power for like survivability purposes, obviously, and this helps that out a lot in survivability and overall just efficiency of being able to actually queue up moves in a scenario where you're using cheap partners and may not have like the best gauge or the best method of healing or survivability, whatever, right? These buffs help out a ton in that regard, and I think these are mostly geared for that mode, though I do think there's legitimately, like other than that, legitimate usage in most of these tiles, like Snatch, the no stat increase effect, and the Unfortuitous can be helpful even outside of the gauntlet. Though I'd say mostly the Unbuffed Foe Freebie and the Sync Move stats up are relatively helpful there. I don't even know if this would be that helpful, but it's at the very least, it's an option. And everything else is good on top of it, so there's that. Anyway, Lear's tiles, pretty good. EX roll, quite good. That buff is good to the special attack. It does make his move AoE, which the Psychic's not really hurting in terms of AoE. I have to find Psychic. In terms of AoE damage dealers, like you got Lucamine with her overall very high level of strength. You got Signasuit Lana. Oh boy. Signasuit Steven with his Sync Nuke as well, right? It's AoE if you're using Attack Form Deoxys. Like there's a decent few amount of AoE psychic options and then free options as well. You got Caitlyn and Giovanni, those two as well. obviously Lear's not really struggling too much to, or Lear's not really filling any niches by being strike, but it does still help, right? Like, I think he wouldn't have benefited more from Sprint, but I think he would have been a good character to get Sprint because he is actually solid with Sync Countdown already. So honestly, I mean, Sprint could have definitely made sense for him. At the very least, it makes more sense than a lot of other characters who just get it for fun. That's kind of something that I find a lot, I notice a lot. Support would have obviously helped a good bit anyway. Support EX gave, you get the adrenaline off of that anyway. If you don't plan on using his nuke too much in the battle, you can still at least get that sync countdown with that. So the support EX plus the sync countdown is nice. I mean, field probably would have been pretty decent as well. Nothing, I don't think it'd been crazy, but it would have been it would have been good. And then again, strike, which is what he ended up getting. Still, strike is good though for the EX roll. Makes his nuke AoE. He can cover single target damage, and now he can cover multi-target stages because he's got a very strong AoE sync nuke. So that is nice. I don't really have much else to add though. I think Lear's upgrades are good. They are good, and he's still a very solid sync pair. Very good offensive stat combined with good multipliers. What else do you really want from a Pokefair character, especially of his age? He will be able to still perform very, very well, especially with, appropriate partners, like maybe Sigma Zulana or Champion Rosa, whoever, right? But whatever, yeah. That's my thoughts about Sigma Lear, not Sigma Lear, regular Lear's rerun, which we will be getting tomorrow again. So, yeah, let me think about the EX roll upgrade and the 4 out of 5 and 5 out of 5 tiles down in the comments below. And yeah, I'll see you all later.